Week 11 is in the books. Week 12 is upon us as we wind down the 2024 SEC football season. Crazy to think we've almost reached the finish line. Our good friend Jake Crain of Crain Company joins us once again to help us make sense of all the madness. Jake, what's going on, man? Appreciate you taking the time as always.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me on. Yeah, madness. That's a good way to put it. This weekend, I mean, it's funny. I was looking, outside of Texas and Texas A&M, after this Georgia-Tennessee game, there's not really a bunch of super sexy matchups. I mean, we're gonna watch. I'd watch. Two blind kids play paper football if that's what it came down to. But we don't have that kind of mega matchup like we're getting this weekend.
Indeed. First, Jake, before we get into what's upcoming this weekend, let's talk what happened just a few days ago. I want to go straight to Oxford, Mississippi. Obviously, I was there for this one, witnessed in person. What'd you see from this game? Ole Miss, they don't just win, they dominate. And, Jake, I have not seen a Georgia team manhandled like that in a very, very long time. I'm talking, obviously, we know line of scrimmage, but even on the perimeter, Jake, we're like, I'm so used to seeing Georgia be able to bully people and work the quick game and these screens. And, I mean, Ole Miss was blowing them up all game long. Offense did enough. I thought Lane Kiffin, Jake, was in his bag. You saw that early when Austin Simmons came in the game. I thought that was one of the pivotal moments of the game. But the defense for Ole Miss was the story. And we asked Jake the question, right, going in, has Ole Miss done enough? Did they add enough pieces to make up the gap? The answer defensively was a emphatic yes.
Yeah, and one of the main reasons I picked him in this game, and I know it wasn't super popular to pick him, was because this was the game. And look, the Kentucky loss, bad loss. The LSU loss, you led the whole game until the end, then you gave it up at the end. You got to give credit to LSU. But these type games against these type teams are what Lane Kiffin built this team for. There's a reason that when you watch this Ole Miss team, and we live in a weird sphere of college football this year, the strength of Tennessee and Ole Miss is their defense. I'm going to say that again. The strength of Tennessee and Ole Miss is their defense. And it's funny, you look in the past with Ole Miss and all these great offenses that they've had, the amazing high-flying offenses that they have, and they've never been able to get over the hump, right? They really haven't found a way to take that next step. They went from the outhouse to the suburbs. Now they're trying to go from the suburbs to the estate with a pool and a gate. And the only way you can do that is on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And it's not just how you lose, or it's not just if you lose, it's how you lose. And the way that Ole Miss beat Georgia and how Georgia lost, Lane Kiffin didn't trick anybody this game. This wasn't some, Rubik's Cube or Sudoku offensively that Georgia just couldn't figure out. A lot of what Ole Miss was running was base stuff. Now, there were some wrinkles in there, but make no mistake, Ole Miss won this game because they were more physical at the point of attack on both sides of the ball. That let them set the tone for the game. That put Georgia, especially after the first couple drives, put Georgia on their heels. To put it simply, Ole Miss beat Georgia like very recent Georgia teams have won their big games. They just smush you. And if you're an Ole Miss fan, that should give you the most hope, because the teams that win the most can win the most ways. And in a playoff format right now, if I'm on the outside of the SEC looking in, if there's one team in the SEC I do not want to play right now, whether that's Penn State hosting a game, whether that's Ohio State, whether that's somebody out of the ACC or the Big 12, it's probably Ole Miss, because offensively, defensively, and on special teams, they are starting to turn into an elite unit in at least 2 out of 3 of those. And you look across the landscape of college football, I mean, you could say Oregon. Outside of that, I don't know if anybody's playing elite football on both sides of the ball and then has good special teams units as well.
Jake, here we are yet again. The Alabama Crimson Tide. We always come back to this, Jake. It's middle of November, and just when we thought maybe Kalen DeBoer and Alabama were, going to fade into the oblivion if they went into Death Valley, and some of us thought that LSU might, here they are. Here's Bama. Thoughts on Alabama, man? If you told me Bama beat LSU in Death Valley at night, this previous weekend. I wouldn't have said you were crazy. I would have said, hey, probably a good game. Like you mentioned, the way you win and lose, Alabama throttled LSU in their building. In their building, Jake. I mean, the LSU perspective, they've got issues. They're down and out. They're mathematically not out of it, which is crazy. But I feel like the bigger takeaways got to be what Alabama did. Jalen Milroe getting back in his bag, almost running for 200, 4 touchdowns. I mean, that was as impressive as Alabama has looked at any point this season.
Yeah, we'll talk about smushing. I mean, Alabama's offense basically, started an OnlyFans account against LSU's defense for 4 quarters. That's why I laughed when some people at the beginning of the year were like, Alabama, it's never going to be good again. They still have really good players. This was not a Pinto or a station wagon that was handed over to somebody to turn into a Lambo. This was already a really expensive-ass sports car that just may not be as sleek as it used to be, but still had a really good paint job, a nice tires with spinning rims on it, a great stereo system, and a driver, a quarterback with experience in the biggest games you can basically possibly play in as a quarterback. So I laughed about that. I think the real question about Kalen DeBoer is what happens when his guys get in there. That's what I want to see. For the good or the bad, can you maintain that when your guys are in there? That doesn't mean he doesn't need credit for this, and he doesn't need some of the blame for when it's gone bad. But here's where I'm at on that game. Let me just start with Alabama. And sometimes going on the road helps you. I don't think some people realize that. You don't sleep in your own bed. It narrows your focus. It tends to have a way to circle the wagons because it's you against all these people. You see it all over town. You see their colors. You don't see yours. And so that can help sometimes. But Alabama, there was nothing cute about this. Nick Sheridan made the decision about halfway through the first quarter that LSU can't stop the run. Not only can they not stop it in the front 7, and we had Matt Moscona on talking about this, the secondary wasn't taking good angles. They weren't having good run fits. They weren't able to get off blocks, and that's how you turn 30-yard runs into 70-yard runs. People are like, oh, my God, how did Jalen Milroe go for 70 yards? Well, the safety misfit. And then the corner was getting blocked. So if I get past that first level, I'm Gonzo the Clown. There's nothing but air and opportunity in front of me. So from an Alabama standpoint, you should be super excited. All right. You should be jacked up. You should feel good. But I don't think Alabama can get away with doing what they did against LSU against Ole Miss. They weren't able to get away with it against Tennessee. They really weren't able to get away with it against South Carolina. You're not going to be able – this isn't old Bama where you can just line up against all the top teams and run power and counter and inside zone and zone read and spit it out and take a shot every now and then and just beat the hell out of everybody. So I wonder if this says more about LSU and not their schematic problems, because let me give you a hint. Scheme's overrated. Coached in Division I for almost 10 years. A lot of people have really good schemes. If you don't have the players, it doesn't matter. I've seen guys that are dumbasses, idiots, couldn't draw up inside zone, but you had great players. You look like a genius, right? So scheme, I'm not saying it's not important, but it's not nearly as important as the personnel. If you're an LSU fan, getting beat like that was a personnel issue. That wasn't just, hey, this guy went the wrong way, or they caught us a couple times, or we blew a coverage. No. That was this group of grown men absolutely pushed around your group of grown men. And in the era that we grew up in, Chris, I don't know about you, that's weird to see from LSU. I've seen it against Ole Miss in the past. I see it every time, you play Mercer or somebody like that. But watching LSU's personnel get treated like second-class citizens physically is still shocking to me. And that is the biggest problem that LSU needs a prescription for. It's not where you line up. It's who you're bringing in to line up. And I know LSU's on their way to fixing that. We've heard about, the bumper crop for 2026 is supposed to be great. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, you keep getting run over like that, there's going to be a lot of problems by 2026, and it may not be as sexy of a place to play. So got to give kudos to Alabama, an absolute dominant performance. I'm interested to see how much of they use of that going forward. You can get away with it against Mercer. You can get away with it against Auburn. But once you get into the playoff, which Alabama goes 10-2, they're getting in the playoff, you're not going to be able to do that against Ohio State. You're not going to be able to do that against Ole Miss. You're not going to be able to do that against Tennessee. You're probably not going to be able to do it against Notre Dame, Chris. So The throwing element is going to have to come back a little bit as well, but you get a lot of confidence out of just lining up and whipping somebody's ass for 4 quarters in the most basic and purest form, and that's in the run game.
To your point, Jake, in regards to that game, I think the matchup played beautifully for Bama. I do agree with you. We'll see if they can carry that on when they have to play somebody where, again, they've got to throw the football, use vertical passing game. Jake, South Carolina beats Vanderbilt 28-7. Simply put, is there a hotter team in the country right now than the Gamecocks?
I think them and Ole Miss right now are two teams in the SEC that they may not be the best, 1-2, but we talk about it's not just if you get hot, it's when you get hot. And if you're South Carolina, man, that LSU game, as happy as you are now, it's got to make you sick. It's got to make you sick. That game does. There's been a couple other ones
at Bama. Yeah, that Bama game was down.
That one, you want to talk about being, having a catalyst to not only the SEC championship, but an insurance game where you could lose it if you only had one loss, and you'd probably be ranked. Hell, you'd be ranked probably where Texas is right now, so somewhere in the top 5. So, I'm really happy for Shane. I don't think, look, a 9-3 team in the regular season that doesn't make the conference championship is not getting in the playoff. They're just not. I could sit here and lie to you. I could tell you that you're more special than the other kids on the playground. But at the end of the day, 9-3 regular season, if you don't get a chance to win the conference championship and get that bye, unfortunately, South Carolina's not going to get in, because if you're a South Carolina fan right now, you're garnering momentum. I know you're losing some defensive pieces next year, but think about the momentum in the transfer portal where you can tell guys, hey, look what we have. We can make a championship run. We got a few holes in the ship to plug, but you can be that guy.
Jake, before we move on to week 12, quick takeaways from Texas. They come off the bye week. I thought it was a really important bye week for them, Jake. They throttle the Florida Gators, which, I'll be honest, when I saw Aiden Warner was starting for Florida, I already knew Florida plus 21.5 was the worst bet I had of the weekend, and sure enough, it played out that way. But Texas, I think it's interesting, Jake, because like you mentioned, they're in that number 2 seed spot. But I've noticed, and we're going to get in the rankings in a second, each of the first 2 college football playoff ranking shows, the panel has somewhat kind of taken a jab at Texas over their schedule, who they played. Oh, their best win is Vandy, but
not the committee, though.
Not the committee.
Not Texas into their veins.
Right. Yeah. Not the committee, but winning with style for Texas is going to be just as important as winning down the stretch. And they certainly did that against Florida, 32-point thrashing in a game that, Jake, they were up 35-0 at half.
Yeah, and look, kudos to handling your business against Florida. Obviously, the quarterback situation and what is going on there. I was hoping, hopefully in the future this game means a lot more, because they're 2 huge brands playing against each other that are important to the sport. Texas feels like, when you play video games, you play video games growing up, and you have to fight like all these lower level bosses that you should beat, and then you get a chance to fight one of the 3 like big bosses in the game. Texas beat up on all the mid-level bosses. They beat up on the teams that they should, but their first chance against one of the big bosses, they got embarrassed at home by Georgia, right? And this Georgia team isn't the Georgia teams that we have seen in the past. So when I look at what this Texas team is, I know they're talented. I know they're good. You can hear my dogs. They obviously don't agree with where Texas is ranked as well. But when I look at Texas, I think the potential is there. Right? It's just Quinn Ewers. He struggled with the injuries. We know he's been up and down. I just don't think Texas is an elite team. I know there's not elite teams out there, but what has Texas shown me to say, you know what? They're better than Ole Miss. They're better than Alabama. They're better than basically everybody else in college football outside of Ohio State and Oregon. I just don't see it, but that's the benefit of the doubt. When you're at a place like Texas, you're going to get the benefit of the doubt. So they're going to get other shots. That Texas A&M game is going to be very telling at the end of the year. I know they got to go on the road to College Station, but I'm just not as high on Texas as some other people are, and I don't really understand why they're ranked where they're ranked. I don't really understand why Penn State's ranked where they're ranked. I know we're going to get into it, but I'm not sold. It's trust, but continue to verify.
That's a great segue, Jake, into I wanted to bring up the bracket. Obviously, again, we're now 2 weeks through this thing when it comes to the college ball playoff. projected brackets, and again, subject to change. A lot can change. I mean, how much of it is just a TV production where they want to get folks like you and I debating it, arguing it, but still what we got is what we got. And I think we're learning about the committee on a week in, week out basis. What do they value? What do they not? How much does head to head mean? How much
You're learning? You've learned something?
Well,
I've learned that there's nothing. There are no rules.
That's still learning. It's still learning, Jake, to your point. Georgia being first team out at this point. I want to start there. Your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it's laughable. Here's the problem, Chris. It's hard to defend and even harder to criticize something where there are no guidelines. There are no rules. There are no criteria. There's contradictions all over the place. And I know you're probably not going to have a perfect list. We put our list, our top 12 together. It's not an easy thing to do. But if you have parameters, if you have guidelines, if you have criteria, at least you can be consistent. At least there's a methodology. Even if I disagreed with every single one of the positions where the committee put a team, if they followed a set of rules, I could live with it. What upsets me, and my dumbass fell for it again, I thought maybe all these bureaucrats and these people with financial ties to certain institutions, maybe they'll be clear-eyed. Or at least maybe there'll be some sort of rubric that you grade teams on, that you say, all right, this is why we did this. And I say, you know what? I disagree with that guideline, but at least there's a guideline. That's not what we have. What we have is a TV show. That's what it is. And we have to talk about it because we have to cover it. It's what we do with our job. I can't ignore it. Can't pretend like it didn't happen. So they know we have to watch it. And it sucks for the sport because they're going to make a ton of money regardless. Like, you're going to make a ton of money. People would be talking about, lower David versus Goliath matchups as much as, hell, we still talk about Boise State versus Oklahoma in that Fiesta Bowl, right? I think there needs to be a balance of all of it, but there needs to be some sort of consistent criteria. For example, strength of schedule doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. I understand Indiana and BYU being up there. There's 3 undefeated teams left in college football in power conferences. I get that. Indiana's going to have to go to Ohio State, and BYU beat SMU and beat Kansas State 38-9, and they're undefeated in the Big 12. Okay, I understand that. What I don't understand is how Texas is at number 3 with no ranked wins and a loss. If Texas was undefeated with no ranked wins, hell yeah, put them 3. But you're not. You have no ranked wins at this point in time, which is the only thing we can go on. Not when it happened, right? So they're there. Penn State, no ranked wins, none, not one, and a loss, right, in their first test. Both teams that got tested, Texas and Penn State, they failed it, and failed it with flying colors. Texas even worse than Penn State. So then you're like, all right, well, that sucks, but maybe, just maybe, it fixes itself throughout the rest of the board. Well, then you look and you say, well, how in God's name is Tennessee 7 and Texas 3 and Penn State 4 when, yes, Tennessee does have a loss, which, by the way, so does Texas and so does Penn State. And you say, well, the Texas and Penn State losses were better losses. I agree with that. But Tennessee has a quality win. Neither one of these teams has a quality win. So you're going to take a quality loss over a quality win. That is asinine. Then you look at probably one of the 3 most egregious things that came out with that ranking. Miami at 9, while SMU is at 14, is insane. It's insane. Miami has beaten nobody. Nobody. And they lost to Georgia Tech, who had 2 halves of a quarterback that made one. They brought one guy in to throw and one guy in to run. A 5-4 Georgia Tech team. You know who SMU lost to? BYU. The number 6 overall team with an undefeated record. SMU beat Louisville, so did Miami. So if everything's even, and you look at the quality of loss, which apparently matters more than quality of win, then how in God's name is Miami in front of SMU? Just somebody sit down and explain. It's like the Michael Scott thing. And, I shouldn't be getting this upset because I knew this was coming. I knew this bullshit was coming down the pipe. The minute you look at who's on that committee, and it's just a joke But it is what it is. Gives us something to talk about. There's no way it's going to work itself out perfectly in the end. Somebody's getting screwed. I just wonder who it's going to be.
Jake, that's funny enough. I was about to ask, do you have any hope that it works itself out in the end? You just answered that. And I tend to be there with you. I do agree with you on the Miami SMU thing. I think that's, and to your point, the criteria, it is make it up as you go along. Jake, before we get off of this, I'll say I feel like, so based off what you're saying too, because I've asked this question, Georgia beats Tennessee, finishes 10-2, they should be in. Ole Miss wins out, they should be in. Bama wins out, they should be in. That's 3. I think you would agree that if Texas loses to A&M, they should be out. That should be the kicker.
You got no good win.
The best win is Vandy or Colorado State. That is what it is. But I feel like, Jake, if, let's just say hypothetically Texas does beat A&M, I feel like we're on track for, unless Notre Dame loses, I feel like we're on track for Tennessee to get screwed, and that sucks to say. I know all the balls listening are going to be pissed, but it does feel like we're on that path.
I disagree with you a little on that. I think Tennessee, and look, they control their own destiny. Like
they beat Georgia, it's a moot point. It's a moot point.
Yeah, you beat Georgia, it's a moot point. But again, I go back to that quality win. And after what Bama did against LSU, Notre Dame's the fly in the ointment here. I think we all know that. I think they're going to lose to Army personally, so I don't think they're going to get in. But I actually think Tennessee, if it came down to Bama and Tennessee and Ole Miss and Georgia, well, Georgia lost to Ole Miss, Georgia lost to Alabama. Tennessee beat Alabama, right? We'll see what happens against Georgia. I don't know how you put Bama in over Tennessee if everything is even, if they won head-to-head. See, this is where logo watching can screw you up, because what happens if there's 2 spots left and there's 3 teams that are all big brands? What if it's Georgia, Bama, and Tennessee? Where's that? What hind teat are you going to suckle on that time? I don't. We'll see.
And to your point, Jake, I mean, listen, you and I, we've got nothing against Texas, but it does feel like if the Texas logo, if this was Missouri or South Carolina, there's no way they'd be where they are, and there's no way they'd be in if they lost to A&M in the season and they had no quality wins.
But I mean, it's almost like at this point, it's almost like complaining. I said this on social media, like, why do the hot girls get all the free drinks and the ugly ones don't?
Did see you say that. Come on, Danny. You know better, Danny.
Danny knows better. This is his shtick.
It is. Jake, on that note, let's look ahead to week 12. We got some big matchups. We'll start with the one in Athens. We will be there at this one in the Classic City. Dogs and Vols. Nico Iamaleava's status sort of up in the air right now, I think. I've seen some folks out there, Jake, saying they think Tennessee's going to win with or without him. I'm not going that far. And
you mean Tennessee fans?
Our friend Barrett Salee went on record, said he's picking Tennessee no matter who plays at quarterback. Listen, this is not Gaston Moore slander hour, but he ain't Austin Simmons. I put it that way. I'm going Georgia in this game, Jake. Your thoughts on this matchup? I tell you, after watching Ole Miss Georgia in person, you think about what Tennessee presents and the challenges they present. That Ole Miss front seven dominated. Jake, I know it's not quite the same, but I could see Tennessee doing the same thing. That's what. Good. But Georgia's finally back at home. Finally got a night game at home in a big game. Thoughts on this one, man? Which way you leaning? Because I think both sides are really compelling. And then there's the Vegas aspect that Georgia's a damn near double-digit favorite in this game.
Yeah, I think I think 3 points hangs on Nico's health. I think Georgia would be probably 6.5.
At least 3, right?
At least, you would think. Here's where I'm at on it. I think either team can win this game. And I think that it's more because of what Georgia isn't than what Tennessee is. And I don't mean that as a knock against Tennessee. It's that we're used to seeing Georgia be so elite on both sides of the ball and to be able to create offensively that even if you go in there and you have one dominant side of the ball, eventually they're going to catch you because they play complementary football. That's not who this Georgia team is. They're better on defense than they are on offense, but they're not elite on defense as we're used to seeing in the past. And you can't expect that. It's impossible to keep up that pace every single year. They are at home. That is massive. Their backs are against the wall. Tennessee needs this win, but they don't have to have this win. Georgia has to have this win. And every team that's had their back against the wall has come through outside of LSU because Alabama and LSU both had their backs against the wall. And somebody had to lose that game, regardless of the fashion that it went. With Nico out there, obviously it makes the path even more narrow in the same vein for Tennessee to be able to win. This game to me is going to look like a diet Clemson-Georgia game. That we saw at the beginning of the year. Tennessee struggled to score in the first half with Nico. I don't think that's going to be helped by him being, even if he plays, coming out of concussion protocol. How much are they going to limit him running? How much is the noise going to affect him or the lights going to affect him and all those things? If you've ever had a concussion or a coach before and had a player had a concussion, you know exactly what I'm saying. I think it's going to be very low scoring in the first half. I think Georgia will probably have a small lead, regardless of who's playing quarterback. Then I think at some point in the second half, Georgia will go up 10-3, 10-0, something like that, and end up winning like 17-10 or 17-7, 20-7, 20-10, something like that. Not as big of a win as they had against Clemson in the second half when it really waterfalled. I just don't see Tennessee being able to consistently threaten Georgia enough. Now, if this game is at Tennessee, I think home field is a huge advantage in this game. But if Carson Beck goes out there and those pick sixes and turns the ball over and in bad territories to give Tennessee a shorter field and an easier path to points, whether that be in the end zone or through the field goal posts, I think that's Tennessee's path to win it. I just think Georgia's going to be very conservative on offense and play the let's not lose the game, which is not sexy. It is not fun. I don't recommend it, but sometimes it's needed. Right. And it's the smart play. So give me Georgia to usurp Tennessee in the second half in what would be a very low scoring game. I'm calling it the diet Clemson-Georgia game.
To your point, Jake, I've already hammered it under 48.5. I ran to that number when I saw it. Give it all to me. Under 48.
Give it to me, baby.
Jake, this is an interesting weekend because we've got a couple of cupcake games. Hey, good news, Jake. Auburn's probably going to win. They got UL Monroe at Jersey here. No general booty for the Warhawks, so Auburn should get it done if they can remember to give the ball to Jarquez Hunter.
Hey, it's basketball season. We beat Houston, Chris.
Finally, hey, thank goodness the plane made it, Jake. Thank goodness.
Look, listen, if that's what it takes, I mean, what did 30,000 feet in the air. Can you imagine? Can you imagine 2, 6, 7 guys fighting on a charter plane that's not big? You want to talk about pissed? Y'all think y'all are bad? Wait till we land. Wait till we land. Y'all's big ass can't be up there doing that. Nobody survives that.
So we got a lot of non-conference action this weekend, Jake. But of the other 3 conference games, one of the three's got a single-digit spread. But I mean, of Arkansas, Texas, which is a rivalry renewed, LSU going to Florida, and South Carolina, Missouri. Which of those 3 intrigues you the most? Again, LSU's the smallest favorite of each. You think madness is taking place in Fayetteville?
Chris, I'm gonna say something. And again, I lived in Fort Worth.
I feel like you're full on like the Texas is a fraud train.
This weekend, Arkansas is going to beat Texas. They're going to beat them. That's all I'm going to say about it. That's all I'm going to say about it.
Okay.
That's it. That's all you're going to get from me, Chris.
Drop the mic. You heard it here first. All right.
Nobody else will say it. I'll say it. Taylor Green, Bobby Petrino, 2 weeks. You know how many Razorback nuggets they've sold? Have you seen Tyson Chicken stock price? Through the roof, right? 2 weeks, T-Will is going to take chances. I'm just telling you, man. Don't let Quinn start bad. Quinn starts bad. Remember what happened last time Texas played Arkansas? Remember what happened? I'm just telling you. Watch out.
Throttling.
Watch out in Fayetteville this weekend. Please, God, be right.
Now that, you talk about shaking up the college football world, the playoff, the bracket.
Nobody else will say it.
Nobody
else picked SMU to play in the ACC championship game either.
You're very right. Nobody else is going out on that limb. Jake Crain at Crain Company. Jake, it's always a pleasure, man. It's always a lot of fun. Again, like I said, Auburn's going to win this weekend, so I feel confident. 24-point favorites. I actually hammered Auburn minus 24. Dude, they beat bad.
Man.
They beat bad teams. Those aren't the ones I worry about. Everybody else.
I don't know if you've looked around here lately, Chris. We are the bad team.
Coming off the bye, man. Come on, they're fired up. And by the way, tickets are going for that one as low as $5. You can go watch the boys down there.
Yeah,
on
or
the
you can
plains.
pay $6 for somebody to show up your house and beat your ass. I mean, which would, to me, I would take the latter.
Yeah, some people will do it for free. Jake Crain Company. Jake, always a pleasure, man. Let folks know what y'all got going on where they can check out all your work.
Definitely. Always love coming on, buddy. It's Crain Company, Crainn Company, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Roku, YouTube, all the digital platforms that I'm not smart enough to remember. Come check us out. If you like this show, I think you're going to like that one.
Jakey the man. We'll do it again next week. Appreciate you.
All right, Christoph.